Hello guys, I'm Stay Patient. Today is the 14th of August 2016 and this is the weekly Trophy Hunters PSN update. This is the show in which I take a look at the most recent PlayStation releases from the viewpoint of a trophy hunter. So let's take a look at the most recent games to be added to PSN profiles. If we scroll down to the bottom, you'll notice that a lot of the games here we covered last week. There are some that have still not been played by anyone because the trophies were obviously added long before the game was even released. I know there have been a lot of questions about whether Claire has even got a release date yet, but the trophies are already here, so the game's going to be off the bottom of this list before the game's played by anybody, unfortunately. But if we remember the name, we can maybe come back because it's got quite a short trophy list. It could end up being a simple game. So if it's one that I remember, I'll try and keep it in the back of my mind, and then over the next couple of weeks, although it won't be on this list anymore, I'll try and sort of make sure to go back and check up on it. And there is actually one game that has been knocked off the bottom of the list already that I did remember to check up on, and we're going to check that before we start scrolling back up through this new list. The game is Coffin Dodgers. Let's have a look here. So Coffin Dodgers, as you can see, 86.32% average completion, which is very high. If we click on it, you'll notice that 82% have earned the platinum, and that's out of 1,696 players. So it's not just like a few people have played it and those people are hardcore trophy hunters. You know, this is obviously a game that trophy hunters are being drawn towards, which is why it's got such a high completion rating. But this website is all about trophy hunters anyway. It's only really trophy hunters that ever view the site and have their details on it. But that's still a very, very, very high completion rating for the platinum. So this is one of my highlights of the week, even though it's not on the sort of most recent releases list anymore, because a bit like Claire kind of got knocked off the bottom before people had a chance to play it, before it was even released. But it's totally worth looking at. It's actually reduced in price on the UK store at the moment. I'm not sure about the EU store or the the US store. I think the EU store is the same as the UK store, but just in a different currency. So it might well be that it's reduced in the EU, and it quite likely will be in the US as well, but I haven't double checked that, so maybe you can look next time you're on the PS4. But if you're looking for a relatively fun looking game that has a super easy platinum, this is obviously a kart racing game, which you can tell. Or, well, it's not really a kart racing game, it's a mobility scooter racing game. It looks like it's got quite a good sense of humour. I've not played it myself yet, but I did buy it this morning, and I'll check it out when I got a couple of hours spare, because if you look at the time, the time requirement on it, on the right hand side here you'll see that almost everyone who is in the top 50 fastest completion times has done it under 3 hours. 2 hours and 22 minutes all the way up to 2 hours and 59 minutes. Now there's hardly any difference between those two numbers. It's about half an hour between the fastest time and the 50 fastest time, and what that tells us is that it's the kind of game that anyone can complete quickly if they want to. So it's totally one that I recommend you guys checking out. Let's carry on with the list though. If we scroll back down to the bottom just to double check on some of the games we spoke about last week that didn't have much feedback going for them. Let's see, talked about Nightmares from the Deep, which we said was sort of the proven easy platinum from last week. Then if we keep going up here, we will get to obviously No Man's Sky, which we spoke about. In fact, I will mention while we're here that I've got some trophy guides up for that game now, so if you check out my channel, you'll notice some guides for the more confusing trophies in the game and the more trickier ones. Even though it is a very easy platinum when you know what you're doing, some of them, you can make some of those trophies very difficult for yourself if you're not aware of how they work. And there's some very easy ways of getting those trophies slightly differently to how you're meant to get them. But even then, I'm not even sure if they're considered exploits exactly. It's just the way the game works. There's some things that people aren't quite aware of that you can do to make life easier for yourself, which I think is meant to be included in the game. I don't think it's like a bug or anything like that. But there are certainly some very important tips that can make life 10 times easier for you. So check out those guides when you have time if you're planning on playing No Man's Sky. We spoke about Bears Can't Drift. Last week there was no one playing it, there was no feedback. so we weren't really sure which way it was going to go. I did say that I figured from the name and from the footage that I'd seen of people playing on Steam, it seemed as though it was going to be either super easy or super hard. Now, at the moment, it doesn't really matter which way it goes because there are 2 unobtainable trophies on it. There are 2 glitch trophies that you can't earn. So the platinum is currently impossible. So for now, I recommend just forgetting that one. Hopefully it will get a patch, and I've heard people say it's not a great game, so I'm kind of going to just ignore it. I'm not going to keep it on my radar. But if you're interested in it, if you really love your kart racing games, and it looks like the kind of game you want to play, if you are a trophy hunter, don't play it yet. Unless you play it on a blank account on your PS4, obviously, you can sign into a, not a guest, but you can set up a blank account and just name it Bears Can't Drift or whatever and play offline. And then if they do fix the trophies, you can go back and finish those last 2 trophies if you happen to get all the others, and then you'll be able to sync the trophies to your account by signing in. I'm not going to explain, if you're struggling to understand what I mean by that, just drop a message in the comments. At some point, I'm going to do a series of tips videos for trophy hunting, and that will be one of the tips, how to use blank accounts. But if you're not aware of how that functions, then just give me a message. It's a very, very useful way of being able to play games without having the trophies added to your account. But anyway, we're going to scroll up here. Brutal looks kind of interesting. I don't think it's going to be an easy platinum, so we're not going to focus on it for too long, but maybe check out some gameplay. It's like a tower climbing sort of, I think, randomly generated, I guess, dungeon crawler. It's difficult to kind of nail down. I think there is a name for the particular genre, but it's not a genre I've spent a lot of time with, but it looks kind of cool. It's quite a cool art style and stuff, so check it out, if you like your indie games. Like I say, I don't think it will be an easy platinum from what I've seen and going by the average completion percentage here, but it could be fun. You may have noticed there's a lot of Japanese games dotted around. There's also a lot of games without platinums this week. Over the last couple of weeks, almost all the games have had platinums, which has given us a lot to talk about. But for the most part, I ignore, in these videos, I ignore the games without platinums. There are some that I point out because they're great games. There was 2 last week, Abzu and Inside, which are both worth playing. But for the most part, we're looking for platinum games for you guys who are big trophy hunters. And the one that stands out this week as the AAA release is F1 2016. Now, of course, this is only going to appeal to you if you enjoy your racing games. The game isn't out for another 5 days, but some people have got maybe review copies or whatever. So we can't really go by the numbers here. There's only 4 people playing it, and I'm sure those people probably aren't working on the trophies. They're probably people who've got copies to review for their YouTube channels. So they're literally just playing the game with the viewpoint of critiquing it. But if you look down through, we're not going to focus too much on this, guys, because I know a lot of you aren't interested in racing games as such. I know I am. I love racing games. I've got a racing seat with a steering wheel and pedals and everything, so I'm definitely going to keep my eye on this. But after last year, I don't want to jump straight in. Last year's game was terrible, apparently. I didn't play it based on the reviews. So hopefully they've sorted things out. But looking through the trophies, you will notice that there aren't any co-op championship ones. So you don't need to find a second person to team up with. There are some online ones. This is probably the most notable online one, win a total of 5 online races. The others just involve completing races and saving a championship. So, there's nothing particularly hard online. It depends how difficult the online is to win races in, but I get the impression you can probably set up a private race with a friend and maybe do it that way, simply because there's no reference to ranked races or anything like that. It doesn't say anything in particular, there's nothing specific about what kind of race it needs to be in. It can just be an online race. So hopefully that means we can do it boosting it with friends, or maybe just have 2 people group up and, actually try and beat each other and eventually both get 5 wins each. There's one trophy here. Most of it looks quite easy, so I'll let you guys look through it in your own time because I know, like I mentioned, not everyone's into racing games. But the one that does stand out is this one, So You Think You're Fast. It's where you need to win a race that's at least 25% in length against ultimate AI opponents. So this depends on lots of things, whether we're allowed to use assists and how good the ultimate AI opponents really are. So this is the trophy that maybe is going to separate the men from the boys. And so, yeah, this is the one I think that we need to keep an eye on, when the game releases. And a lot of people are playing it. It'd be good to see how many people earn this, maybe get some feedback on it from the trophy forums. because I think if this particular trophy is doable and not too difficult, then it makes this entire trophy set quite a straightforward one for you racing game fans and trophy hunters. Anyway, we're going to duck back out to the list here, and there's a couple more games that I just had a quick look at that look quite interesting. In fact, before we go to them, Metrico is worth a mention because no one's playing it yet, but it's I think a re-release of a Vita game. There was definitely a game called Metrico on the Vita. I'm not sure if it's a direct re-release or whether it's maybe had stuff added to it or whatever. I think it's going to be the same game because most of the trophies are the same. The only ones that have been added, because the Vita version didn't have a platinum, it was just a short trophy list. So you can see there's lots of golds here because it's still quite a short list. So they need all those golds to top up the, the overall number of PSN points so that it can reach platinum status, I guess. But the trophies that have been added are speedrun ones. So the game on Vita got a 1 out of 10 in difficulty if you follow a guide, because there's collectibles involved. So if you follow a guide and you can find the collectibles by using the guide, then the game becomes very, very easy. Now, because they've added these speedrun trophies, it could be that these particular trophies make the game a lot harder than it was on Vita. So I think this is definitely one we need to wait and get some feedback about. I haven't played the game, so I couldn't tell you how strict these times look. Maybe if you have played the game on Vita, you might be able to look at these and think, oh yeah, I completed all those levels in less than a couple of minutes anyway, so it's fine. Or you may look at it and think, wow, crumbs, I took like quarter of an hour to do most of the levels. How on earth am I going to do it this quickly? So could go either way. Definitely one that we'll look back on next week and try and extract some feedback and information about. Let's see here though. We have also got a couple of games here that I just thought looked kind of interesting. The Absolute Drift Zen Edition is like a top-down drifting game. So it kind of reminds me of some of the Dirt games. Now you may remember on Dirt 3, I think, and then Dirt Showdown, I think it was called. You had a lot of Gymkhana events where you're doing donuts around obstacles and jumps and things like that. Now this looks like that, but from a top-down perspective. It also has quite an interesting art style. Well, I say interesting, it's different. It's you could say it's the opposite of interesting. It's actually very dull and bland. It's all the same colour by the looks of it. It's very sterile, almost a bit sci-fi. But I think that's so that your eyes aren't drawn away from the actual drifting, because it looks like the kind of game that they might well have made very difficult. They could have easily made it a difficult game to play and to earn the trophies on. Or if those trophy requirements are quite lenient, it could be an easy one. So again, it's another one that could go either way. But it looks like something different, is sort of akin to MotorStorm RC, if you remember that. And also the old Micro Machines games. Now we're really going back. That shows how old I am. I think Micro Machines was PS1, I believe. So yeah, it's like, top down, almost like you're driving a little radio control car, although I think it's a real one. Anyway, we'll move on because it's not so interesting that we want to spend too long on it. The next one, just to mention here, is Bound. Now this also had speedrun related trophies. You have to complete the levels a certain time, you have to complete the whole game and collect all the memory shards in a certain time. Now there are other trophies related to collecting the memory shards. So really, this looks like the kind of trophy set that if you complete this one trophy, then you'll pretty much get all the other ones, because all the rest of them are related to finding secret areas, which may have shards in. I don't know, I've not played the game yet, it's not out, but if those secret areas contain shards, then you'll need to go to them anyway for this trophy, and you'll need to collect all the shards, so you get all this group of trophies, and you'll also be completing each of these levels in whichever time it states, if you're getting an overall fast completion. Although it might be that because we've got 2 speed runs here, we've got 50 minutes and an hour and 5 minutes with collecting all the shards, it could be that if you complete it in an hour and 5 minutes, it takes a bit longer because you're getting the shards, and maybe you miss out on some of these, so you might need to do a second playthrough. But to be honest, if it's only around an hour long anyway, it's not going to take long to run back through it again to get the rest of the speedrun trophies. the collectibles, those shards that were mentioned, I believe they're not sort of hidden collectibles, but they're almost like the orbs in Enslaved. This is kind of a platformer, a very basic platformer. It's 3D, but the character dances, and I'm not sure how the dance really relates to the playstyle or the mechanics of the game, but it was something they added to the game later on because they felt it was a bit bland, it needed something to make it stand out from the crowd. So you can actually watch an interview with the developer on IGN. Marty Sleever interviewed the developer, and they were talking about how they had this platform and they were kind of happy with it, but they wanted to add something. So they added this dancing mechanic. There's actually a trophy near the bottom, dance for 1 minute. And it looked as though these shard collectibles were dotted all over the level. You know, they weren't sort of the odd occasional hidden collectible in a hard to reach place. They were just all over the place, and you'd collect them as you were moving your way through the level. And of course, I'm sure there are some in kind of awkward places where you need to make jumps in a certain way, or whatever the case may be. But it certainly looks like the kind of game that could well end up being relatively easy, especially going by all these trophies. There doesn't seem to be anything that stands out as being different to the rest or really requiring anything too hardcore. So I think that's definitely one for us to keep an eye on. And hopefully that's out. I think, let's have a look actually. We'll check the release date. Bound on PS4 release date. Let's see. Oh, August 16th by the looks of it. Okay, so that's in 2 days' time. So this week, by next week, we'll have a nice lot of feedback on Bound for you guys, and we'll be able to either recommend it to you or not, you know, depending on which way it goes. So there we go, guys. It's not been the most exciting week for releases. Just to backtrack, we've got a few games that we're going to go back to. We've got Bound, we've got Metrico, we've got Absolute Drift, and F1 2016 really is something that we need to check on as more people start playing it on its release day, which is on this Friday, I believe. But it certainly looks like a doable platinum with one trophy that could end up being tricky depending on how difficult the AI is. Then we've got, let's see, Bears Can't Drift is glitched at the moment, so maybe steer clear of that one. Has 2 completely glitched trophies that aren't possible to earn at the moment. And then we had Coffin Dodgers. Coffin Dodgers was the main game I wanted to recommend to you guys. I feel like there was a second one as well, which was an easy platinum. I'm forgetting. You can probably watch back through the video again and try and figure out what I'm thinking of. I think it was probably Metrico I'm thinking of, which looks like it is likely to be quite easy. But Coffin Dodgers, guys, that's the game that I'm going to recommend to you as the perfect game for you trophy hunters out there. Go and check it out. It's on offer on the UK store, and I'm sure it will be on the European and the US stores as well. It's around £7 in the UK, £7 or £8, quite a nice cheap game. It looks kind of fun, it's got a good sense of humour. And so go check that out. It takes about 2-3 hours to complete, so hopefully we can all get a nice easy platinum added to our collection. Alrighty guys, so thanks for joining us for another edition of this show that I'm hoping to make a regular thing. I've done it for the last 3 weeks, and as time goes on, I'll gauge people's interest in it. And if it builds an audience, then obviously I'll put a bit more effort into the production value of it. We'll start looking into getting some gameplay for these games, and just make it all a bit more professional. But at the moment, I'm just kind of filling things out to see if you guys are interested in it. And so I really appreciate those of you who are taking the time to tune in. I will catch you next week in next week's episode, in which hopefully we'll get a bit more feedback regarding F1 and some of these other games that we've talked about. And of course, we'll have some new games. Just worth mentioning, actually, I was thinking of new games that might be up on PSN Profiles by next week. Deus Ex Mankind Divided. The trophies for that game have been announced. I haven't had a chance to look at it this week, but when it does get added to PSN Profiles, obviously we'll add it into the rotation for the weekly video. But the trophies are online. You can find them. They have been leaked. There was like a video that the developers put up where it streamed, it very quickly sort of flicked through all the trophies, and people have done sort of stop frames and written down each one, and you can view the list. It looks quite kind of Quite varied. It has got the typical Deus Ex trophies, you know, no alarms, you know, don't set off any alarms, and I think don't kill anyone throughout a whole playthrough, things like that. It looks like it's going to be a very fun game, but that should be out by next week because the game's out in I think a week or two. So that's one that we'll discuss next Sunday. So in the meantime, guys, keep your eye out on the channel for more content between now and next week's episode, and I will see you when I see you. Cheers, guys. Catch you later.